This episode of We Interrupt This Broadcast is sponsored by Getty Images, home to market-leading creative and editorial content from the world's best photographers and videographers. Getty Images is a trusted partner and creative advisor to media and production companies and YouTube native studios, offering over 37 million footage clips, including video from a range of world-renowned broadcast, studio, filmmaker, and archive partners. If you're looking for historical, contemporary, or creative footage, head to gettyimages.com to find out more. Hey, Aven.
Hey, Kirsty. How was your month of July? It seemed like it was only last month where we were just ringing in the new year, the new content quotas had just started, and now we're 6 months in. I just can't believe that.
I know. I always have to treat the new financial year as a bit of a new year reset again because so much happens in that first 6 months. And then suddenly I look up and I go, oh, wow, where did that time go? And what haven't I done yet? So it's been nice to kind of regroup and I'm feeling really motivated at the moment.
It certainly was an eventful July. I can't wait to dive in.
In exciting news for the podcast this month, we have a new sponsor joining us, Getty Images, and they are obviously the home to archive footage and images that you can use across your productions. Did you know they have over 37 million footage clips?
I do know that they have 37 million footage clips because I used to work for Wild Bear and we would know their libraries inside out for history shows, wildlife shows, that sort of thing.
Amazing. Well, we're really excited to partner with them. So welcome, Getty.
And is it Getty or is it Getty?
We had this argument offline, which I love. I mean, me being from the proper Adelaide accent world, Getty makes sense. There's two T's in the name, but I was shut down by the Queenslanders in our team. Getty or Getty, we are thrilled to have them on board. They'll be partnering with us over the next few months' worth of episodes, so keep an eye out for their news and highlights.
Well, our first story is that the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese gave a speech announcing a centralised office of AI and incoming mandatory national AI standards.
Yeah, this is the big AI story of the month. It's a pivotal point in time for our industry and Australians as a whole as to what our stance on AI is going to be moving forward at a government level. AI companies are essentially trying to get our laws changed so that they can come in and use our creators' data in return for investing in this infrastructure. So many people from across the creative industries have been in Canberra advocating for the protection of creative IP and Australian creators' work. So this culminated in a speech from Albanese, which did two things that I think are key. Firstly, there's going to be a new legal obligation for data centre operators in Australia to underwrite their own power supply, not increase household power prices and minimise water usage, which to me seems like bare minimum expectation, but it's good that it's being put into law. And then on the creative front, there was a really strong response from Albanese, who reiterated the government's commitment to the strongest possible protection, was the quote, for artists, musicians and journalists.
But have the horses already long fled the stables, Kirsty? Is this a bit like too little, too late? Like I remember the day that ChatGPT entered into the marketplace, and I wonder by now how many scripts, books, artworks have already been used to train the models. What difference does these sorts of standards make unless it can claw back all of the things that they've already ingested into their systems?
Yeah, I think we can't change the past, but we can set a marker for where we want to go in future and whether what's happened is legal or not. I know in other countries, so the United States, European Union and Japan, there is no obligation for AI developers to pay for the content that they've trained on, whereas here in Australia, there will be that obligation. Amazing quote from Albanese, I thought, in that speech was, no company should use Australian books, music, art or news to build or train AI without the artist's control. Anything less is theft. And it's true. Even if there has been theft in the past, that's not a reason to say it's okay to continue stealing in future. Kate Armstrong-Smith, who is one of the founders of Athelia, is one of the people who has been in Canberra advocating on behalf of the screen industry. The centre of her argument is that the core claim that these tech companies are trying to establish isn't true. They're trying to say that licensing creative work at an AI scale is impossible. Whereas that's exactly what YouTube has done with their content ID and acknowledging where work has come from. So it's absolutely possible. It's just so important that we protect our IP because it's a growing asset. It's not like the mining industry where you come in once, take something out of the ground and then it's gone. IP continues to generate value over time. And if that value is going to big tech companies rather than creators, then that's completely unfair. So there have been a couple of interesting articles I've read about AI this month. One is an opinion piece called Can Filmmaking Survive Without AI by Daniel Mays on LinkedIn. This is about how the conflict and the arguments we're having about AI and that debate between technology and creativity may not be the best lens to work from. We're always talking about, will AI replace writers, actors, creatives, crew? And this article is saying that those questions matter, but the real reason that AI will become unavoidable is just the economics of it. And it goes into some fascinating detail about how and why that might happen. So I think that one's worth linking to in the show notes.
I was talking to a development manager in Canada who does a lot of kids animation. And she said the number of proof of concepts and pitch decks that I'm seeing that have AI with the big eyes and the uncanny valley is sickening. And she's like, I am starving to see a pitch made by artists, real human beings. This is maybe the unintended consequence now that everyone seems to think that they can be an animation producer or a film producer, and they're just making essentially the same thing because that's what AI does. It recognizes patterns and tries to recreate them over and over again. But our creative standards as a whole has diminished, and now the people who are wanting to make decisions and elevate the industry are starving for quality content.
The other thing I think AI does is just increase volume. So I'm sure they're getting a lot more submissions in, even though they are of that lower quality. There was an article I read this week as well about the impact that volume is having. The film data reporting site, The Numbers? They went down earlier this year, and Stephen Follows released an interview with the founder talking about why that was. And essentially, they've had so many AI bots going to the website and scraping data that it's just caused massive problems for the infrastructure of their site, which was designed for a previous version of the web.
Wow. So who wins? Who wins here?
Yeah, well, part of the conversation was about how previously search results would drive traffic back to your site and you would have audience, but now AI is scraping that data. So the initial creator isn't even getting the benefit of putting their work out there. It's a really fascinating article. I'll link to it in the show notes for anyone who wants to dive in.
There have been a few big losses in the industry this month, Kirsty.
Yeah, the first big loss is Sam Neill, which was obviously news shared around the world due to the impact he had on people through his work, especially on Jurassic Park. The film that really stands out for me is Hunt for the Wilder People. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. Have you seen it?
I started watching a little bit of it after Sam Neill passed away, actually. It's a beautiful movie. It's so special.
And I think the thing with Sam is that he just managed to make an impact on people no matter what he was involved with. It wasn't just his acting skill, but it was the way that he reacted to the world and what he cared about. I mean, I came across an article in the Batuta Advocate announcing his death, and the title was Sam Neill dies after 78 years of living the Scuck's life. And when the Batuta is taking something seriously and giving a moving tribute, you know that you've made an impact. Another really sad loss for our local industry was Tania Lambert, ACS, cinematographer, who lost her battle with cancer last week. There's a beautiful tribute to her from Carolyn Constantine on the ACS Instagram page, but also so many personal memories and people sharing tributes to her. Some of Tania's work includes The Moody's and Patricia Moore, features Here Out West and Riptide, and recently TV series Bad Behaviour and Erotic Stories. She's accredited by the ACS in 2018, which speaks to the quality of her work. But the number of tributes showing up online and the personal stories that people have about her, again, show that who she was and her legacy go far beyond just her as a creative and into who she was as a person. A few big announcements and changes from Screen Australia this month as well, Aven.
Yeah, Screen Australia refines their guidelines for narrative content development and documentary development, and it's part of their ongoing process to streamline their application process. The biggest change, I think, is that they have capped the maximum application funding amount for development to $50,000.
That's a big reduction in terms of maximum funding amount.
I remember when they first reformed the guidelines, they were really encouraging producers to include their fees, to pay themselves properly, and they were listening to the feedback of producers of we only really pay ourselves a nominal amount out of these development funding applications. And now it seems they've had to reverse that messaging and clamp down.
I guess there's only so much development funding to go around, and they're trying to spread it across as many projects and give people as many opportunities as possible. But there's so much to be said about a project that is underdeveloped, and I don't know where we're expected to find and pay for these minimum writers' fees across multiple drafts of a script.
There's a Cantonese saying, "都唔夠塞牙窿," which is, this is not even enough to fill the gaps between our teeth. And I think that this might put a lot more pressure on writers to write on spec and to deliver completed scripts.
And when you're reducing development funding, it means that potentially you can't take on those external script editors or consultants because you just don't have the funds to pay them, which means the producers are taking on that work. It can take me half a day to give the level of notes that I feel are helpful in driving a project forward and not just surface level.
Because you want to be considered about these things. And being a writer myself, I know when a note hits and when a note falls flat. And that comes from a lot of careful consideration from the producer or the person giving the note.
And producers take that on because they care about the quality of the work. There's also some new marketing and audience design initiatives coming out at varying levels depending on the budget level of your project. We'll link in the show notes to a masterclass that was recently run through Screen Australia to introduce one of these initiatives. And it's really just about using data to try and identify your audience, where to find them, understand their opinions before a film is released in cinemas. And some of that is through audience testing, but it's also about understanding the pulse of topics and conversations that are happening in the zeitgeist and then being able to feed them back into your film and the way that you market it in various territories differently.
I have never done an audience design project like this before. I feel like I can see the value. I'm just so curious to see what's behind the paywall, per se, as to what that process is like and how successful it can be.
Yeah, well, this masterclass is worth watching. It was run with Publicum, which is an international company that is coming in, and there will be several Australian production teams that have the opportunity to work with them through the initiative. But they gave some really great insight into making audience data work for your film. And it basically comes from anthropological principles, which I found really fascinating.
Anthropological principles? What do you mean?
As in the way that humans interact and engage with content and ideas, I guess.
That's very cool.
The other big release from Screen Australia this month was their private investment toolkit. And this is a hugely valuable resource for anyone financing a project. So you can go back and listen to our most recent episode, which was the interview that I did with Grania Brunsden and Ian Murray about the toolkit, walking you through how to use it and some of the features that it involves. Netflix's viewer numbers have just been announced for the first half of 2026, and there's a couple of Australian projects in there worth highlighting. War Machine was the most watched film in the first half of 2026 across the platform, and that was filmed in Victoria. So congratulations to all of the crew who were part of that one.
And the most watched Aussie series was The Amazing Digital Circus by Glitch, Season 1, with 10.4 million views. And Heartbreak High, Season 3, was the most watched Netflix ANZ original with 6.9 million views since its premiere on March 25th.
Yeah, and I really love that The Amazing Digital Circus was up there in those numbers because they release all of their episodes on YouTube and then go to Netflix at the same time, which just proves that having a YouTube release doesn't diminish your audience numbers. It can actually be beneficial for the streamers to take on those shows.
And I think for these commissioners who were so afraid of, if we put it on YouTube, it'll cannibalize our audience on Netflix, the fear of the thing is sometimes worse than the thing itself.
Yeah, I think recently we're finding that the more your content is available and the more there can be conversations about it in any space and any platform, then the better benefit there is to the show itself because it just builds it into the fandom and into the zeitgeist. We saw there was a backlash with Backrooms this month where they tried to shut down some fan-sold artwork related to the Backrooms phenomenon. And Kane Parsons actually came out saying that he developed it out of this online world and therefore other artists and creators should have a right to develop content from that original story world as well. So A24 backed down.
I think this is so telling of what audiences are needing and starving for now. They're just wanting to connect. I think with this post-AI age that we're in, people just want to talk about the things that they're really passionate about in as authentic as a way that they can.
Absolutely. I was tracking the Heartstopper Forever release last week, and there's just so much fandom involved and so many people who that show has had a generational impact on. A few big festival announcements recently. It seems like it's the time of year for festivals. CinefestOz has announced their finalist films for the $100,000 film prize, Australia's richest film prize, I believe. So those are The Fox, Sweet Milk Lake, Yesterday Island, and Wilderness. At TIFF, there are 3 Australian films premiering: 2.6 Seconds, Death in the Outback from Blackfella Films, Tenzing, which is Jennifer Peetham's latest project, and Prima Facie, starring Cynthia Erivo. That one is a co-production driven from the Australian half by Bunya Productions. And then at Venice, we have Agatha the Writer, Moth Mama, and What Love Builds. So lots going on in the festival space for Australian films. I'm also personally very excited about Adelaide Film Festival. They've just announced their first 10 films for the October festival as well.
Does the Adelaide Film Festival release it in parts, the program?
They normally release their first announcements early and then they'll have a program launch. And I always love sitting in that cinema when that program launch is held because you see all of these beautiful little 30-second clips and snippets and excerpts. It always reminds me of what we're doing this for.
I don't know if you know, but the Telluride Film Festival is famous for keeping its full schedule and lineup completely secret until the day before the festival officially opens. That's pretty gutsy.
Yeah, that's the antithesis to how I would think to market a festival. They've got an audience, I assume, who's just built on the trust of the curation model that they've developed, as opposed to going for the individual films or the program itself.
There's something quite tantalizing about that, though, where it's like you have to surrender your will to whatever the curator and the programmers decide. And whether you like it or not, you've already booked the flights and the accommodation, so you have to show up. That's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I love that. And unlike the trust you put in an algorithm where you can click away within a few seconds if you decide that it's not for you, you're kind of socially obligated to stay in a cinema for the full 90 minutes of a film. I love that.
A few industry movements. Lisa Rose is the new Screenworks CEO. And we have 2 new Screen Australia board members in Tania Chambers and Christopher Chard.
Yeah, I don't know Lisa, but I'm very excited to see what she brings to that role at Screenworks, particularly at Regional to Global, their upcoming conference, where people will have the chance to meet her in that role for the first time. I'll be up there in Lennox Head in early September, and I'm really looking forward to meeting her then and seeing what her new direction for the organisation is. And there's a couple of opportunities open now to apply for. Australians in Film has their Future Vision Forward initiative open for applications. This one's an 8-month online television project development lab, which sounds really exciting.
And applications are now open for the Screen Producers Australia Wants to Watch program for 2026 and 27. Now, interestingly, Kirsty, they have 2 streams. One is their producer stream, but this year for the first time, they've included a stream for creators.
I saw that and I tried to read through the guidelines and understand what the difference was. I'm curious to know how they're going to bring those 2 strands together.
So I saw the guidelines very briefly because I used to be a Wants to Watch alumni, and so I'm quite happy with new developments and how they're making the program more inclusive. You have a mentor who is a member of the SPA membership. You also get to do the business essentials courses that spa and afters put together, and you can attend the spa conference as well. So it seems like even though it's including creators, they are still very much putting them on that producer track that the other stream puts their participants through.
Yeah, and I'd be really curious if anything goes the opposite way, where producers are integrated into that more creator business model thinking and they learn from each other, because I think that's the space where things are going to really get interesting.
First, I think there would have to be a lot more creators becoming spa members. Both are content producers in their own respect. However, there still seems to be quite a divide between the two, even though we can see in the headlines that there is this blurring between the creator economy space and the traditional space. But I think on the ground, when I talk to creators, there is still this sense of creators are on one side of the wall and traditional producers are on the other side.
Yeah, and it has been a long time. Like my first project as a producer was a web series, and that was back in 2012. So we're kind of 14, 15 years into this process trying to integrate the two worlds. And I still feel like that divide is too large.
I wonder if there are just irreconcilable differences. I was approaching a creator to put together a TV series, and when they heard that it would take a few years to put together, they were just appalled. They were galled by the timeline that traditional long form projects need. Creators love the creative process on that side of the fence because of its speed. Whereas that's just not something that long form producers can entertain because it does take time to mount a film or a TV project.
What have you been watching this month, Aven?
I just watched this amazing Chinese film called Dear You, and it's out in cinemas now. And on paper, every part of it should have failed. It's a period piece. It's mostly non-professional actors. It's low budget. It's this multi-decade epic told in Teochew, which is a minority Chinese dialect that most audiences outside of the Chinese diaspora have never heard on screen, potentially not even in real life. But I'm telling you, Kirsty, the cinemas were packed. They were packed. I'm not going to put it next to Toy Story 5 and the Supergirls. You just can't compare apples and oranges. But I think what the insight is that Dear You nailed audience specificity. Every Chinese family WhatsApp group is talking about this film, and that's the real story here. Word of mouth was so successful in getting that film released and getting it to an audience. A friend at my church has a mum who's involved with the local Teochew association in her hometown in Malaysia. And the way this film holds cultural representation for the diaspora was so tasteful. It's really authentic, and yet it wasn't overly sentimental. It wasn't overly earnest. There wasn't a dry eye in the cinema. I just think they've tapped into something quite unique into how well you need to know your audience in order to compete against the Hollywood marketing machine.
I haven't seen it, but I'm going to make an effort to go and do it now.
Do you like watching films with subtitles?
I do. I do love a good subtitled film. On the flip side, I did go and see Toy Story 5 because it was the school holidays. So I went with my son. And I'm always just so impressed with how Pixar ties everything together. Like the structure works, the quality of the filmmaking worked. Although my son did come out of the cinema, the basic premise is it's the toys against the new tech and finding that balance for children in figuring out how they play. And he came away from the film and I asked him, who was your favorite character? And he said, Lilypad. And I said, oh, and why did you like Lilypad? He goes, because I want to play video games. So I don't think he quite got the premise, but it was a really good day at the cinema.
And have you seen the trailer for the Netflix reboot of My Brilliant Career?
I have, and I've been invited to a special screening here in Adelaide because it was filmed here. So I'm going to get a slight preview window to view it before anyone else, which I'm very excited about. I think it looks amazing.
Yeah, I feel like they made it feel so expansive and expensive as well in the beautiful Netflix way. I'm personally excited about seeing an Asian male romantic lead in an Australian major TV series.
Yeah, and I think this is the first Australian production under Amanda Duthie. Also out at the moment, Easy Tiger Productions' Treasure and Dirt, which was also filmed here in South Australia, and that's getting really fantastic reviews, so I can't wait to watch that one.
And the third and final season of Colin from Accounts, again by Easy Tiger, who I booked and blessed, has just been released on Binge.
Can't wait to watch that one either. In production, it's that time of year where there's lots going on around the country. Here in South Australia, Lady Death has just wrapped. In Victoria, Knee-High Spies Season 2 is going into production. And speaking of spin-offs and IP, Wentworth Halfway Home has just started as well. So this is life on the outside for the Wentworth ladies.
Here in Queensland, Werner Film Productions and the ACTF Scales, a new family film for Stan, is filming on the Gold Coast. And also filming there is Jump, which is a high-stakes survival thriller from acclaimed New Zealand director Te Kahi.
And New South Wales has a few big productions as well. Scrublands Trust is in production, Starman with Brendan Fraser and Jeff Daniels, and Extraction 3, which is Chris Hemsworth and Idris Elba.
And that's all for the month of July. I'll be at the Melbourne International Film Festival for 37 South starting in August, as well as the Australian Children's Content Summit later next month. How about you, Kirsty?
I've got my head down working for the next month here in Adelaide, and then in September I'll be heading to Regional to Global up in Lennox Head. So really looking forward to that. They've just announced their first speakers in the program.
Eventful month.
It has been. Now back to your regular programming. We Interrupt This broadcast is recorded on the unceded lands of the
Gadigal people of the Eora Nation,
the Turrbal and Yagara people,
the Yugambeh language people, and the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains, and we acknowledge them as the traditional custodians and first storytellers of these regions.
Always was, always will be.